It was Halloween 2017, and things were already bad at home. My older brother Jake had just been in a serious car crash on his way back from college. Some idiot rear-ended him on the interstate at high speed. His leg was shattered, multiple fractures, screws and pins, the works. The doctors said he'd be in the hospital at least a week, probably longer. We weren't big on holidays to begin with, but that year we skipped Halloween entirely. No decorations, no candy, no porch light. My parents were exhausted and on edge, driving to and from the hospital every day. I was 16, still in high school, and I'd never been left alone overnight before. That night they decided they were going to stay at the hospital with Jake because he was in a lot of pain after surgery. "You're old enough for one night," my mom said as they grabbed their coats. "Lock the doors, don't open for anyone, call us if you need to." Dad hugged me and reminded me to set the alarm system. They left around 7 p.m. The house felt empty as soon as the door closed. We lived in a typical 2-story suburban house with a backyard and a Ring doorbell camera we'd installed after a string of package thefts. I didn't feel like sitting alone all night, so I texted my friend Thomas, who lived a few blocks away. We always played video games together. "Parents gone, come over," I wrote. He showed up about half an hour later with chips and energy drinks. We set up in the living room, fired up the Xbox, and got lost in Call of Duty. We shouted at each other, trashed each other's gameplay, and for a while I forgot about hospitals and broken legs. Outside I could hear kids trick-or-treating, shouting and running between houses, but we ignored the door. The porch light was off. Nobody was supposed to come up anyway. Time blurred. Around midnight Thomas's phone buzzed. His dad was outside. "Gotta bounce," he said, hitting pause. "Dad's here." I walked him to the door, watched him climb into the car and waved as they pulled away. Then it was just me. The house hummed softly, the fridge, the AC. It was the first time I'd truly been alone at night. It felt strange more than scary. I flipped through channels and left some old sitcom rerun on. The canned laughter made the place feel less empty. Around 1 a.m., someone knocked on the front door. 3 quick, hard raps. I sat up and muted the TV. Who knocks at 1 a.m. on Halloween? Maybe some late kids trying their luck, but our lights were off and we hadn't given out candy all night. I picked up my phone and opened the Ring app. The live view loaded. Clear night, empty porch, nobody there. The street looked normal: parked cars, deflated Halloween inflatables, dark houses. Weird. Maybe something had bumped the door. I shrugged it off and unmuted the TV. A few minutes later, another knock. Louder, more deliberate. My pulse jumped. I opened the Ring app again. This time someone was standing right in front of the camera. A clown. He wore a full mask, white face with exaggerated red lips and a bulbous nose. The costume was a sagging polka dot jumpsuit, gloves covering his hands. In the cold, grainy night vision, he looked wrong, too still, too quiet, standing under the dead porch light. I stared at my phone, frozen. "Hello," I said through the app speaker. My voice came out thin from the doorbell. "Who are you?" No answer. The clown tilted his head a fraction, staring straight into the camera. Then he knocked again, slower, boom, boom, boom. This didn't feel like kids messing around. The mask and costume looked professional, not cheap. And it was 1 a.m. "What do you want?" I said louder. He didn't move. Just stood there with his arms at his sides, breath fogging in the air, watching. Maybe it was a neighbor with a twisted sense of humor. But why? At that hour? I hit record on the Ring app. "Leave now or I'm calling the police," I said. I tried to sound steady, but my hand was shaking. After a long pause, he turned, walked down the steps, and disappeared into the darkness at the edge of the driveway. I kept my eyes on the feed until he was gone. Then I checked every lock on every door and window. The alarm was armed. I texted my mom. Some creep in a clown costume knocked on the door. Ring recorded it. He left. Just FYI, no reply. Probably asleep in a chair at the hospital. I tried to watch TV again, but every sound made me jump. The house settling, a car passing, the HVAC kicking on. I kept refreshing the Ring view. The porch stayed empty. By 3 a.m. I was exhausted. The adrenaline had burned out. I turned off the TV, got a glass of water, and went upstairs. My room was at the end of the hall, window facing the backyard. I changed, plugged my phone into the charger on the nightstand, and climbed into bed. The house was absolutely still. I scrolled through social media, Halloween party pictures, costumes, the usual, and eventually drifted off. I sleep like a rock. No dreams, just blackout. Morning light leaked through my blinds. I grabbed my phone to check if my parents had texted. The screen opened straight to the camera app. Weird. I didn't remember leaving it like that. Maybe I'd hit it by accident during the night. I swiped out, checked my messages. One from my mom, "Good morning, Jake's stable. Call later. Love you." Then I opened my photo gallery to see if the ring clip had saved properly. My stomach dropped. There was a new video, timestamped 4:02 a.m. The thumbnail was dark, but I could see the outline of my bed. I hit play. The video was shaky, like someone was holding my phone. It showed my room from near the foot of the bed. I was there asleep, covers up to my chest, breathing steadily. The camera panned slowly, lingering on my face. My heart hammered. How was this recorded? Then the camera flipped. The screen filled with the clown mask from the night before. Up close, it was worse. The makeup around the eye holes was smudged. The painted grin looked stretched too far. He held the phone in one gloved hand. In the other, he held a kitchen knife. Our kitchen knife. The big one from the block downstairs. The blade flashed in the phone's LED light. He pointed it toward the background, toward me, sleeping. The picture shook slightly, like he was laughing softly. The video cut off. I dropped the phone. My hands went numb. Someone had been in my house, in my room, inches from my bed. The doors were still locked, alarms still set. No broken windows, no forced entry. I replayed the clip, pausing on the knife. The handle had a chipped corner from when Jake dropped it last summer. No doubt it was ours. I forwarded the video to my mom and texted, "Mom, someone was in the house last night. Watch this now." She called almost immediately, voice shaking. "Stay inside. I'm on my way. Don't open the door for anyone." She made it home in 20 minutes. Dad stayed with Jake. We watched the video together. She wrapped her arms around me and cried. Then she called the police. 2 officers came, a graying man and a younger woman. I told them everything. The knocks, the ring footage, the clown costume, the morning video. They watched in silence. "Could be a prank," the older one said finally. "Halloween night, kids do stupid things. Maybe a friend got hold of a key, tried to scare you." I shook my head. "No, Thomas is the only one who was here. None of my friends would pull something like that. And the knife, how is that funny? They dusted for prints in my room and the kitchen. Nothing useful. The mask hid his face, the gloves hid his hands. No distinguishing marks. No license plate on camera. Without a positive ID, there's not much we can do beyond a report," the woman officer said. "We'll increase patrols. You should change your locks, maybe add more cameras." They left. My mom packed a bag and took me to a hotel near the hospital that night. We told Jake a version so he wouldn't stress. The clown never came back. No one else in the neighborhood reported anything. The case went nowhere. I still have that video. And I still wake up some nights, sure that someone is standing next to my bed, just out of frame. I was around 12 when this happened. My parents went out of town for a family event and left my older brother and me home for the weekend. It felt like freedom. We ordered pizza, watched movies, stayed up late. Our German Shepherd, Chaka, hung around the whole time, tail thumping whenever food appeared. He was big, strong, and protective, the kind of dog that makes you feel safe without even trying. After dark, the house grew quiet except for the TV and rain pattering against the windows. Our neighborhood was small and usually calm, but at night the shadows stretched longer and distant dog barks sounded closer than they were. Around 9 p.m. I heard voices outside. At first I thought it was neighbors, then I heard my name called from the front gate. I went to the window. 3 boys stood by the fence. I recognized 2 from school. The third was older, maybe 19 or 20, with messy hair and an oversized hoodie. He leaned against the gate, watching. My brother came up behind me and hissed, "Don't go out." But I knew those guys. We played soccer together. I figured they were just bored. I slipped on my slippers and stepped out, pulling my hoodie tight. The streetlight flickered overhead, throwing twitchy light across the wet pavement. They smiled when they saw me. "Hey, we were just walking around," one said. "We wanted to show you something." "It's late," I said. "My parents aren't home." "That's fine," another said. "Just come to the corner for a second." The older guy still hadn't spoken. He just stared, eyes drifting slowly down my legs and back up. My stomach knotted. "That's my cousin," one of the younger boys said quickly. "Don't mind him." His tone was forced, nervous. The other boy reached behind the lamppost and pulled out a brown glass bottle. The label was peeled off, cap missing, half empty. "Here," he said. "Try it, it's not strong." I shook my head. "No thanks." "Come on," he insisted, stepping closer. "It tastes good, you'll be fine." My heart sped up. The older cousin's hand rested on the gate latch. His thumb rubbed the metal slowly. He kept his eyes on me, biting his lower lip like he was enjoying it. I wanted to call my brother, but my voice stuck. Then, without a sound, Chaka appeared behind me. I hadn't even heard his nails on the floor. He pressed against the back of my legs and sat, his body a solid wall. His head lifted, ears pricked, gaze locked on the stranger at the gate. A low growl vibrated out of his chest. Not a bark, just a deep rumble that grew louder. The older guy's smirk vanished. He dropped his hand from the latch and stepped back. "Whoa, easy," he forced a laugh. "Nice dog." Chaka didn't move. His growl deepened. His teeth bared slightly. The boys glanced at each other. "Let's go," one muttered. "Forget it." The cousin hesitated, glaring at me for a second. Then Chaka took one deliberate step forward. That was enough. They backed off and walked away, their voices fading down the street. I stayed frozen a moment. Chaka remained in front of me until their footsteps disappeared. Then he finally turned his head to look up at me, as if checking I was okay. I knelt and hugged him, burying my face in his fur. He gave a soft whine like, "I've got you." My brother opened the door. He'd been watching through the curtain. "I saw everything," he said, pale. "That guy was about to open the gate." We locked every door and window that night. I barely slept. Chaka lay outside my room until morning, breathing slow and steady. The next day my dad called to check on us. My brother told him. Dad went quiet, then said, "Good thing you have that dog." When he came home, he grilled a full steak and gave the whole thing to Chaka. The dog wolfed it down, tail wagging like he knew why. Weeks later at school, one of the boys from that night avoided me, wouldn't meet my eyes. I overheard someone say his cousin had been arrested for harassing girls near a local park. My stomach dropped. I never told my parents that part, but I knew what Chaka had really stopped. After that, he got even more protective. He followed me to the yard, the kitchen, waited outside the bathroom. He stood beside me anytime someone came to the door. If he didn't like them, you knew. He lived a long life. His muzzle went gray, but his eyes never lost that sharpness. In 2008, he died peacefully on the kitchen floor where he used to nap as a puppy. I sat beside him with my hand on his fur, feeling that same warmth from the night he stood between me and the gate. I keep a photo of him, lying on the kitchen tiles, eyes half closed in the morning sun. That's the Chaka I remember. Not just a pet, my guardian. I always knew my grandmother as tough and no-nonsense. She'd been a nurse for over 30 years, long shifts, sick patients, raising kids through money problems. Nothing rattled her, except one thing, a recurring nightmare she'd had since she was a little girl. She only talked about it when I was older, usually at her small kitchen table with the loud clock ticking behind us. In the dream, she walked down a long, dim hallway, old building, flickering lights, that institutional kind of gloom. Her footsteps echoed. With each step, dread built in her chest like a weight. Everything in her wanted to turn around, but she couldn't. At the end of the hallway, she always turned left and opened a door. The moment she saw what was inside, she'd wake up gasping, soaked in sweat. She never remembered exactly what she saw, only that it was terrible. She had that same dream on and off for decades. As a kid growing up broke in Chicago during the Depression. As a young wife in the 1950s with my grandfather, a mechanic. Even later, after my dad and aunt were grown. Sometimes she'd joke that it was just stress or too much pasta before bed, but you could tell it shook her. She'd wake my grandfather. He'd grumble, then hold her until her breathing slowed. "It's just a dream, Mary," he'd say, but it always came back. Sometimes once a month, sometimes more. By her 40s, life had steadied. My grandfather had a stable job at an auto shop. They could afford little trips. In the summer of 1972, they took my dad, 15, and my aunt, 12, on a road trip from Illinois to Florida. Beaches, theme parks, the works. Money was tight, so they booked motels as they went, finding whatever was cheap. Near Orlando, they checked into a basic 2-story hotel. Pool out front, vending machines in the lobby. It was peak season and packed, so they couldn't get adjoining rooms. Instead, they got 2 rooms on the same floor at opposite ends. My grandmother and aunt shared one. My dad and grandfather shared the other. "It's fine," she said, unpacking. "We're only here a couple nights." They spent the day swimming and building sandcastles. My dad remembers it as totally normal. Sunburn, ice cream, silly photos. That night, everyone crashed early. My dad and grandfather each had a twin bed along opposite walls. The room smelled like chlorine and old carpet. The AC hummed. My grandfather snored lightly. Around 3 a.m., my dad jolted awake. No obvious reason, just that feeling something was off. The room was almost completely dark, a faint orange glow leaking through the curtains from the parking lot. He stared at the ceiling a second, then said, "Dad." No answer, just the AC. He figured his dad was sleeping heavily. He reached over and switched on the bedside lamp. "Dad," he said louder, sitting up. Still nothing. My grandfather lay on his back, covers pulled to his chest, eyes closed. But his chest wasn't moving. A knot formed in my dad's stomach. He got out of bed, bare feet on the cold floor, and shook his father's shoulder gently, then harder. "Dad, wake up." No response. His skin felt cold. Panic hit. He might have only been 15, but he understood. He bolted out into the hallway in his pajamas. It stretched long and empty under harsh fluorescent lights, doors lining both sides. He ran barefoot down that corridor, past doors where families slept soundly, and pounded on my grandmother's door. "Mom, Mom, open up." It felt like forever, but eventually she cracked the door. Behind her, my aunt sat up in bed, confused. "What is it? What's wrong?" my grandmother asked, instantly alert. "Something's wrong with Dad," my dad choked out. "He won't wake up." Her face drained of color. She didn't even grab her robe, just hurried after him in her nightgown, my aunt trailing behind. The hallway felt endless now, exit sign glowing red at the far end. My dad's room was the last one on the left. They turned and pushed the door open. It was still ajar from when he'd run out. My grandfather was in the same position. My grandmother rushed to him, shaking him, calling his name. "John, John, wake up." He didn't. She checked his pulse, listening and feeling with that ingrained nurse's instinct. No heartbeat, no breathing. A sudden, silent heart attack at 48. My aunt started crying. My dad was frozen. My grandmother sat on the edge of the bed, shaking his hand. They called the front desk. Paramedics came. Lights flashed outside. Too late. The vacation ended in that room. There were arrangements, calls home, getting his body transported to Chicago. My grandmother moved through it all in a daze, crying only later, alone. They buried him at their local cemetery. People told stories about his jokes, his love of fixing things. Years later, when I was a teenager, my grandmother told me quietly on the porch swing, "I never had that dream again, not once." It took her a while to see the connection. The endless hallway, the left turn, the door, the terrible thing behind it. It was the hotel corridor, the last door on the left. Her husband, dead in his sleep. She'd been dreaming a warped version of that scene since childhood, long before she met him. She wasn't superstitious, didn't believe in ghosts, She'd shrug and say, maybe it was my mind preparing me, maybe coincidence. But it haunted her. She lived another 40 years without that dream. She nagged all of us about our health, insisted on checkups, hated when we stayed in cheap motels. That hotel is probably still there. Different paint, different carpet. New families walking that same hallway. No clue what happened in room 112. The idea of a nightmare mapping out the worst night of your life decades in advance still unnerves me. She died peacefully in her sleep at 88. No mention of hallways or doors. I still prefer hotels with short hallways just in case. Halloween night, 2024. My favorite holiday, and one of the last I figured I'd be able to trick or treat without feeling too old. Earlier in the evening, my sister and I went with our parents to a small family pub where they met friends for dinner. We left around 9:30 p.m. to go home. I sat in the back seat, half-empty candy bag beside me from a few stops we'd made earlier, scrolling my phone and planning my next candy run once we got back. We were cruising through our quiet suburb, porch lights glowing, jack-o'-lantern smiling, the usual. My sister stared out the window. "Oh my God," she said suddenly. "Look at that dude." About 50 feet ahead on the right side of the road, a man walked slowly. He was dressed head to toe in silver. Clothes, face, everything had that metallic sheen. He moved stiffly, like those human statues downtown who pose for tips. Except this wasn't downtown. "That's weird," I said, leaning forward. "What are the odds he's looking for kids?" My sister joked, half laughing. Our mom chuckled and eased past him. As the headlights washed over him, I saw he wasn't carrying a bag or bucket, just walking with his head slightly tilted, arms rigid at his sides. His eyes flicked toward our car as we went by. Then he was behind us, swallowed by the dark. We got home a couple minutes later. The air was colder, the street quieter, just faint music and laughter from a party somewhere down the block. I dumped my bag on the table, grabbed a flashlight, and decided to do one last loop. I thought about taking our dog, Max, a medium mixed breed who looked tough and was scared of absolutely everything. Still, he made me feel better, so I clipped on his leash and headed out. At first it was fun. A few houses still had lights on. People complimented costumes, fog machines puffed, skeletons glowed. Max sniffed every pumpkin, slowing me down. After a while, I realized I wasn't getting far. "Come on, buddy," I said. "You're too slow." I brought him back home, unclipped the leash, and stepped outside again. The neighborhood had thinned out. Most porch lights were off. Fewer kids on the sidewalks. I worked down the street, only knocking at houses that were still lit. At the end of the road, where it curves toward the main drag, I glanced back and froze. Under a flickering streetlight about 50 yards away stood the silver statue man. This time he wasn't walking. He stood beside a dark car that had just pulled up to the curb. Could have been a sedan or hatchback. Tinted windows, lights off. He opened the rear door and pulled out what looked like a dark duffel bag. Then he stopped and scanned the street, head moving slowly side to side, searching. I could hear my own heartbeat. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe he lived nearby. Maybe he was done with some event. But the way he moved, slow, purposeful, set off every alarm in me. "Screw this," I muttered. I turned and walked briskly back the way I'd come, trying to act normal. My footsteps sounded too loud. The air felt heavier. I told myself not to look back. Then I did. He was gone. The car was still there, dark and still, but he was no longer beside it. I sped up, turned at the next intersection onto a dimmer street. Only one or two porch lights glowed. Everything else was shadows. Behind me, an engine started. A cold wave moved through me. Not quite fear yet, but close. Headlights appeared down the road, moving my direction. Slowly, too slowly. Same size, same dark paint. I shifted to the sidewalk and pretended to fuss with my candy bag. The car rolled past at a crawl. The rear window on my side slid halfway down. Inside, in the dim interior light, I saw silver. My throat went dry. I turned down another side street, cutting across a driveway to put distance between us. Behind me, the engine noise stopped. The car idled. I didn't run. Not yet. I didn't want to sound like prey. Then I heard a car door open, footsteps on pavement. At the same time, further ahead, I heard a house door creak open. "Hey, is that you, Danny?" A man called from a lit porch holding a candy bowl. The car's engine roared, tires squealed. It sped off, screeching around the corner. I didn't look back. I ran toward the porch light. The man on the steps stared at me, puzzled. I mumbled a thank you and told him I was heading home. He nodded slowly. The walk back felt shorter, but every dark driveway made me flinch. I kept expecting that car to turn the corner again. It never did. When I got home, I locked the door and went straight to my room. My parents were downstairs, watching TV like any other night. I peeked through my window at the quiet street, peaceful again. But every Halloween since, whenever I see someone in a full-body costume or a still, statue performer, I remember silver paint in the dark and a car that moved too slowly. It was about 5:30 p.m. when we arrived at the hotel. The lobby smelled of cleaner and coffee. Spanish was the first language there. I didn't speak it. The young woman at the front desk spoke very little English, but between us, we managed check-in. We found our room and pushed the door open. At first, I thought someone had left a doll on the bed. It looked like an old porcelain baby doll. Blonde fuzz of hair, round pink cheeks, tiny hands tucked under a thin blanket. It lay so still I had to step closer. I touched its cheek, warm, breathing. A tiny chest rising and falling. The baby was real, maybe 2 months old. My mind went white for a second. Then I grabbed the bedside phone and hit 0. "This is Mrs. Cook in room 27, I said. "There's a baby on our bed." The receptionist's voice came through tinny and hesitant. She asked if I wanted a cot. "No," I said, "not our baby. It belongs to someone else." She seemed to think I was requesting a crib for a friend's child. I repeated that the baby wasn't ours and someone needed to come take it. The baby made a little gurgling sound. That small noise felt wrong in the empty room. It twitched its hand and hiccuped. My stomach twisted. I tried again, speaking slowly. "The baby is not sick. It needs its mother." The receptionist asked in broken English if she should call a doctor. My voice rose. "I need to speak to the manager. This is an emergency. You must find the baby's mother and send her to room 127 now." The baby woke fully and started crying. High, sharp, demanding. The sound cut through me. Nobody should hear that alone in a strange room. I picked the baby up and tried to soothe it. The blanket was damp. There was a dark, wet circle in the middle of the bed. The baby latched onto my little finger and sucked hard. It calmed a little, and something maternal and ridiculous kicked in. I just met this child, but I cradled it like glass. We decided to bring the baby down to reception. It felt weird and exposed, walking through a foreign hotel with a crying infant. The hallway carpet muffled our steps. Somewhere outside, sirens wailed faint and distant. At the front desk, a young man in his 20s stepped forward. Relief washed over me when he said he spoke English. I told him what had happened. He turned and explained in Spanish to the receptionist. I watched her face shift from confusion to visible relief when she realized the baby wasn't dying. He told me the child seemed okay. I took the baby to a quieter corner of the lobby and rocked it. The lights were too bright. The air smelled harshly of bleach. I put my finger back in its mouth and it settled again. My husband and the translator spoke at the desk. I stared at the baby's tiny fists and sighed breaths. The calm didn't last. The front doors flew open. 4 men in green uniforms stormed in, police, belts heavy with batons and guns. They spotted the baby and me immediately. 2 of them moved fast. One took the baby from my arms like it was contraband. The other grabbed me, wrenched my arms behind my back and snapped metal on my wrists. The handcuffs were cold and final. For a second I thought I might faint. My husband and the translator shouted that there had been a mistake, that we'd found the child and brought it down. The officers ignored them. They shoved me against the wall. Paint dust scratched my shoulder. The lobby's fluorescent buzz grew loud. I could still hear the baby crying somewhere behind me. It felt like accusation. Then a maid ran in. She was young, in a hotel uniform, sobbing. A man in a suit hurried after her carrying a black doctor's bag. She was speaking rapid Spanish, tears streaking her cheeks. The officer's grips loosened. One handed the baby to the doctor, who held it close and checked it quickly. The translator filled us in later. The baby belonged to the new cleaning lady. She'd started the job that week. Her babysitter hadn't come that day, and scared to miss work, she'd brought her infant with her. She'd fed the baby and tucked her down in what she thought was an empty room. New and nervous, she'd gotten turned around and left the baby in 127. When she came back and couldn't find her daughter, she panicked and called the police, thinking the child had been taken. She and her sister had been in the car park crying when the police arrived. They rushed in expecting a kidnapping in progress and saw a foreign woman holding the baby. Everything escalated from there. I sat there cuffed, shaking, while men in uniforms and suits shouted and gestured around us. Eventually, they uncuffed me. The manager apologized over and over. We were given a better room, free meals, vague promises. At a corner table, the maid sat cradling her baby, feeding her, clutching her so tightly it looked like she might never let go again. She cried quietly, eyes fixed on her child, avoiding my gaze. That night I slept badly. I kept seeing a tiny hand, a damp blanket, the wet patch on the mattress. The memory of the cuffs stayed on my wrists like phantom bruises. The next day, the manager drove us to the police station to sign statements saying we wanted no action taken. The chauffeur translated. I insisted we didn't want trouble for the maid. Before we left, I put together a small package of baby items and some cash. When I handed it to her at the desk, she smiled in this cracked way that almost broke me. She opened the envelope and saw the money. It looked like more than she'd see in months. She hugged the bundle to her chest like it was another child. I never heard from her again. But sometimes, when I'm in a hotel room and the bed looks too perfect, I think of that wet patch and the sound of far-off sirens, and how quickly a stranger's baby can turn you into a suspect. My dad died of a heart attack when I was 12. For over a decade, it was just my mom and me. Then, 2 years ago, she remarried. His name was Robert. The whole thing was a whirlwind. They met, dated, and got married in about 3 months. I didn't know much about him beyond retired architect and seems to make mom happy. For that alone, I tried to be supportive, even though the speed freaked me out. After the wedding, she moved into his house in rural upstate Virginia. A few weeks later, she called, excited for my fiancé Alex and me to come spend a long weekend. She wanted us to see her new home and really get to know Robert. I agreed. It felt like time to try. The house was undeniably beautiful. A big modern place at the end of a long gravel drive, sitting on hundreds of rolling acres. No close neighbors, picture perfect. Robert was friendly, big guy, firm handshake, easy smile. He and my mom looked genuinely happy. They gave us a tour and told us to make ourselves completely at home. From the second I walked through the door, though, something felt wrong. It was like the air pressure changed. Heavy, pressing down on my chest. Not fear exactly, just an oppressive weight. I told myself it was my own stuff. The weirdness of seeing mom with someone new, the guilt, the jealousy. I figured I was projecting. Outside, wandering the property, that feeling eased. Under the open sky, it was fine. But every time we went back inside, it settled on me again, especially in the upstairs guest room where we were staying and in the hallways. That night after dinner, Alex and I showered before bed. As I turned away from the mirror, he went quiet. "What did you do to your back?" he asked. "What? Nothing. Why?" "You have a huge bruise," he said. "Like really big." I stepped out, wiped the steam from the mirror, and craned my neck. Between my shoulder blades, I could just make out a dark purplish blotch. I must have bumped into something earlier without noticing, I decided. We shrugged it off. When we got into bed, that pressure in the room was worse. The only window was a big single pane overlooking a black, empty field. No curtains. No blinds, just glass and darkness. I couldn't stand it. Every cell in me was sure that if I left it uncovered, something would be standing out there, watching us. After 10 minutes of tossing and turning, I got up, grabbed the spare blanket from the closet, and tacked it sloppily over the window. Only once the field was hidden could I finally fall asleep. The next morning, I woke up sobbing. No build-up. 1 second asleep, the next sitting bolt upright, tears pouring down my face, heart racing. A wave of pure panic crashed over me. "We have to leave," I choked out to a stunned Alex. "We have to leave right now." He tried to calm me, said all the things I'd told myself. "This is just anxiety, change is hard, you're overwhelmed seeing your mom in a new life. It'll get easier." I couldn't hear him. The sense of wrongness in that house had become unbearable. It wasn't logical fear. It was primal, like my brain screaming, "Get out." I was sitting on the edge of a full-blown panic attack. It took everything I had to pull it together enough to go downstairs. I mumbled something about a migraine, apologized, promised we'd come back soon. My mom looked worried. Robert looked baffled, but they didn't push. We packed in 5 minutes and were on the road by 9 a.m. We were supposed to stay until Monday. The moment we turned off the gravel road and hit the highway, it felt like a physical weight slid off my shoulders. I could breathe again. The panic drained away, replaced by crushing embarrassment. I was sure I'd insulted Robert and ruined everything. We drove in silence for a while. Then Alex said, still looking straight ahead, "That bruise on your back, did you really look at it?" "Not really," I said. "It just looked like a big blob in the mirror." "It wasn't just a blob," he said quietly. "I didn't want to freak you out last night, but it looked exactly like a handprint. Like someone pressed their hand flat on your back, fingers spread. And the hand was angled up toward your shoulder." A cold shiver rippled through me. No one had touched my back that day. I would have remembered someone grabbing me hard enough to bruise. I had no explanation. 3 weeks later, my mom came down to the city for lunch. She spent most of the meal gently pushing me to come back for another visit. "Robert's worried he did something wrong," she said. I kept dodging. Eventually, she brought it up again, and I decided to be honest. "Mom, I have to tell you the truth," I said. "Something about that house really got to me." As soon as I started describing the heavy feeling, the dread, the window, I watched the color drain from her face. She set down her fork. Her expression turned serious, almost scared. By the time I finished and mentioned the handprint bruise, she was white. Then she told me she'd been feeling the exact same way since moving in. Constant anxiety and unease for no clear reason. She hated being alone there. The silence felt hostile. She wanted to sell and move, but didn't know how to tell Robert without sounding crazy. "And there's something else," she said, voice trembling a little. "His first wife. The reason the house and land were so cheap," she swallowed. "She killed herself," Mom said. "He told me she battled depression for years. Then one day she took one of his hunting rifles, walked into that field and shot herself. She met my eyes, right outside the window of the room you were sleeping in. This happened a few years ago when I was in high school. We were a small group of idiots who liked daring each other to do dumb stuff. That night, it was my turn. Around 9 p.m., we met by the old cemetery at the edge of town. Iron fence, leaning stones, big trees blocking out most of the moonlight. The rule was simple. One person walked through alone, touched the stone angel in the center, and brought back video proof. My friend Leo invented it. He said his older brother used to do it. Everyone talked tough on the way there. Once we were standing at the gate listening to the wind in the grass and distant highway noise, it felt different. "Your turn," Leo said, handing me his phone. "Straight down the path, you'll see the angel." I sucked in a breath and headed in. The gravel crunched under my sneakers. The air smelled like damp leaves and earth. My flashlight sliced thin beams through the dark. The deeper I went, the bigger the cemetery felt. Headstones everywhere, some so worn the names were gone. One grave had fresh flowers. Another had a crack on one side that I told myself was from erosion, not horror movies. After a few minutes, I saw the angel statue. It rose in a small clearing, face worn smooth, wings chipped. I turned on the phone camera and pointed it. "See, I touched it," I whispered, trying to sound cocky for whoever watched later. I put my hand on the cold stone. That's when I heard it. A soft crunch behind me. I froze. Could have been a friend sneaking in to scare me. But the sound was slow and measured, like careful steps. I killed my flashlight and ducked behind a tall headstone, dimming the phone screen. My heart thudded in my ears. The footsteps came closer, heavy, uneven. Peeking through a gap between two stones, I saw a shape. A man, not one of my friends. He was tall and thin in an oversized coat, head bowed slightly. He dragged something along the ground behind him, maybe a stick, maybe something else. He stopped near the angel where I'd just been standing. Moonlight caught part of his face. His eyes were wide and glassy, not really focusing on anything. He muttered under his breath over and over. It sounded like a name, repeated like a chant. Then he knelt by a grave and started digging with his hands. At first I thought he was grieving and had snapped, but the way he tore at the ground didn't look like grief. It looked desperate, animal. Every part of me screamed run, but my legs wouldn't move. I watched him claw dirt aside, fingers muddy. After what felt like forever, he stopped. His head turned slowly toward the stone I was hiding behind, like he knew. I held my breath and squeezed my eyes shut. Footsteps crunched closer. I pressed myself to the ground. He stopped on the other side of the stone. I could hear his breathing fast, ragged. I smelled dirt and something metallic. Then he whispered right above me, "You shouldn't be here." My stomach dropped. I didn't move, didn't breathe. After a few seconds, his footsteps moved away, fainter, then gone. I waited another full minute before I dared to look. The path was empty. I ran. I tore back along the gravel, stumbling over stones, barely aiming the flashlight. When I saw the fence and my friends, I didn't slow down. They laughed when they saw me sprinting, thought I was hamming it up. I couldn't talk. I just shoved the phone at Leo with shaking hands. He started the video expecting a joke, then frowned. "Who's that behind you?" I snatched the phone. The clip showed me approaching the angel, saying, "See, I touched it." When I spun the camera around mid-sentence, just for a second, a blurry figure stood on the path behind me. They said it was a trick of the light. I knew better. We left right after that. I never looked back at the graves. That night I couldn't sleep. Curiosity finally won, and I Googled the cemetery. One brief article from a few years ago. A man had been caught there at night digging up graves. He told police he was searching for his daughter's body. She died and been buried elsewhere, he insisted, but he was convinced she'd been moved. He disappeared not long after. I deleted the video the next day. Some dares just aren't worth it. This was in October 2009. I was 19, working part-time at a video rental store to help pay for community college. The job wasn't glamorous, but it worked with my schedule. I usually worked closing shifts, leaving around 10 p.m. and walking the mile home. The route wound through a quiet residential neighborhood. Older houses, big trees, sodium streetlights casting orange halos. That fall was unusually cold and damp. For 2 weeks straight, a thick fog rolled in every evening. The kind of fog that swallows sound and shrinks the world to 20 feet. My walk, usually peaceful, started to feel like moving through a small, private bubble. The first night I saw him, I barely noticed. I was halfway down Maple Avenue when I glanced behind me. Through the wall of mist, I saw a dark shape. A person, walking. They were maybe half a block back. I assumed it was someone else heading home and turned forward again. The next night, same thick fog, same route. At the same spot, I looked back out of habit. Same silhouette, same distance. We're a small town. People walk similar routes. I told myself it was just bad timing. Night after night, it kept happening. Every time I walked Maple, that figure was behind me at the same distance, neither gaining nor dropping back. After about 6 nights, the coincidence stopped feeling like one. It felt like I was being escorted. On the 6th night, I decided to test it. Halfway down the block, I stopped and bent over to tie my shoe. I stayed like that for a solid minute, straining to hear through the muffled fog. Nothing. Relief crept in. I was being paranoid. Thick weather, tired brain. I stood up and looked back. Empty sidewalk, just fog. I let out a shaky laugh and kept walking. About 20 steps later, I heard it. A single soft footstep behind me. I froze. Another, I turned. He was there again. Same distance, same silhouette. It was like he'd simply appeared, waiting for me to move first. That's when fear really sank its teeth in. This wasn't coincidence. He was pacing me. I sped up. My heart pounded. Behind me, his footsteps quickened to match. Still not running, but faster. I broke into a jog. His steps turned into full-on running. Heavy, rhythmic, not far behind. I sprinted, backpack thumping, lungs burning. I didn't look back. I focused on the dim blobs of the streetlights, praying I wouldn't trip. My house was 2 blocks away. It felt much farther. My driveway finally appeared through the haze. I cut across the soggy lawn, fumbling my keys. They slipped from my fingers and clattered onto the wooden porch step. The second they hit, his footsteps stopped. Silence. Thick, heavy silence. I was bent over, gasping, staring at the keys. I could feel him in the fog at the edge of the porch light. After what felt like a year, I straightened and forced myself to look. He stood at the end of my driveway. Tall, skinny, completely still. Just a black cutout in the gray. No face. No clothing details. Just a person-shaped hole in the fog. He didn't move. I grabbed the keys, jammed the right one into the lock, and shoved myself inside, slamming and locking the door. In the living room, I peeled back a slat of the blinds and peered out. The street in front of my house was empty. I never walked home alone at night again. My dad started picking me up from work. Eventually, the fog stopped rolling in. I never saw him after that. Maybe it was some jerk playing an elaborate prank, but the way he moved, freezing when I did, keeping the exact distance, didn't feel quite human. Now, whenever I'm out in fog, I can't relax. I keep expecting to hear that one soft footstep behind me. I grew up on a small farm in rural Iowa. Cornfields in every direction, neighbors a mile away. My grandparents built the farmhouse in the 50s. My parents took it over when I was a kid. It was just me, Mom, Dad, and my little sister Eva. We had chickens, a vegetable patch, and my dad worked as a mechanic in town. Simple life, no drama. 5 years ago, when I was 22 and still living at home to save money, things got strange. I'm not someone who jumps at ghost stories, but what happened still won't leave my head. It started with little things you can excuse in an old house, creaks, drafts. One late fall night, I was upstairs on my phone before bed. The house was quiet. Eva was asleep. My parents were downstairs watching TV. Around midnight, I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my room. Slow, heavy, like work boots. "Hey, Dad," I called. The footsteps stopped right outside my door. Silence. I waited, then got up and opened it. Empty hall. I told myself it was the house settling. A few nights later, same thing. This time I was in the kitchen at the sink. The back door faces the barn with a window looking over the yard. As I rinsed my glass, I saw movement in my peripheral vision, a dark shape slipping past the window. I turned. Yard was empty under the motion light. Probably a coyote or deer, I told myself. That night, lying in bed, I heard footsteps again, this time going down the stairs. I grabbed my phone flashlight and followed. The downstairs was dark, my parents snoring softly from their room. All doors locked. I shook it off. Then Eva, 15 at the time, started complaining about nightmares. She said she'd wake up feeling like someone was watching from her closet. I teased her about watching too many horror movies. Mom thought she just missed our cat, who had died months earlier. One morning, Eva showed me 3 thin scratches on her arm. "Look," she said, "I woke up with these." "Cat," Mom suggested automatically, then caught herself. "Maybe you scratched yourself in your sleep." Eva insisted she hadn't. I stopped laughing it off. The turning point for me came on a Friday when my parents went to town for a movie, leaving Eva and me alone. We played board games in the living room. Wind howled outside, typical Midwest December. Around 9 p.m., the lights flickered and came back. Happens sometimes. Eva went upstairs. I stayed to clean up. As I switched off the living room light, I felt it, that prickly sensation of being watched. I turned toward the hallway. At the mouth of it, by the stairs, a shadow stood. Not just dim light. A tall, vaguely human shape, edges blurry, darker than the surrounding dark. "Who's there?" I shouted, grabbing the fireplace poker. It didn't answer. It didn't move. Then it seemed to turn and slide, not walk up the stairs. I flipped the switch back on. The space was empty. I ran upstairs. Eva was reading in bed, totally normal. I didn't tell her, but I slept with my door locked that night. After that, things escalated. Keys moved from counter to table. Doors I closed stood open. Footsteps became a nightly ritual, pacing the upstairs hall and the stairs. I set up our old baby monitor in the hallway one night and left the receiver on my nightstand. The audio picked up faint whispering, low, angry mumbling. No words I could make out, just hostile. Dad listened, said it was interference, wind. The worst was when I saw it clearly, mid-December, snow outside, everything quiet. I'd been repairing a fence earlier and went to bed sore and tired. I woke around 3 a.m. thirsty and went into the hall. The shadow was standing at the top of the stairs, closer than before. About 6 feet tall, broader than me, arms hanging down. No face, but I could feel it looking at me. The air got thick and humid. "What do you want?" I whispered. It cocked its head like it heard, then took one silent step toward me. I backed into my room, slammed the door, and shoved my dresser against it. In the morning, I told my parents everything. They exchanged looks and gently suggested stress or maybe seeing a therapist. Eva, though, nodded like she'd been waiting. "I see it too," she said quietly later when we were alone. In the corner of my room, by the door, in the hallway, we checked the house history. No tragedies, just that my great-uncle had died of a heart attack in the attic decades ago. Carbon monoxide detectors were fine. It kept getting bolder. During dinner one night, the lights dimmed. Behind Mom's chair in the doorway, that shape appeared, just standing. I dropped my fork. Eva's eyes went wide. "You see it too," she whispered. We both pretended nothing was wrong for my parents' sake. The final straw came when it came into my room. I was half asleep when my door creaked open. No knock. I sat up. It stood at the foot of my bed, closer than ever. I could smell damp soil like turned earth in the fields. It reached out a dark arm. Pressure slammed into my chest, heavy like someone pushing down. My breath caught. I couldn't get air. I thrashed and shouted. Dad burst in, flipped on the light. It vanished. They said nightmare, sleep paralysis. We moved within a month, sold the place to a couple from the city. We didn't mention the shadow. Now I rent an apartment in Des Moines. No creaking farmhouse. No endless fields. And at night, nothing stands at the end of the hall. My name is Alex, and this happened when I was 16. I've always loved autumn. The last red leaves clinging to bare branches. The sky the color of bruises. That constant gray overcast that makes everything feel dramatic. The beauty and loneliness of it suited me, but I was bored out of my mind in my small town. My friends Jake and Maya were sick of hearing me complain. They decided I needed something exciting to snap me out of it. "Alex, you know the old Miller place," Jake said one day, eyes lit up. "That shack in Blackwood Forest, it's only a few miles in. It's not haunted, just old." Blackwood Forest wasn't just old, it was legend. People whispered about weird sounds, disappearances, bad vibes. The Miller place was an abandoned logging cabin, deserted for 50+ years. Locals said a dark soul was trapped there. Normally, I'd roll my eyes at ghost talk, but something about the idea of being there alone, surrounded by that forest, stuck in my mind. It wasn't really their dare I was answering. It was my own challenge, something to break the monotony. One brisk Tuesday afternoon, with the wind moaning like a distant animal, I packed a small backpack. Flashlight, compass, water, my dad's old hunting knife from the garage. "Dad, I'm going for a long walk," I called, lacing up my hiking shoes. He grunted from the living room, eyes glued to his football game. I'd always gone on long autumn walks,